Hello, my name is Joseph Urshetta. I'm a 52-year-old researcher with a Master's of Pharmacogenomics from the University of Washington, Seattle. I'm currently a DRPH candidate in the Environmental Health, Science and Engineering program at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. I am originally born and raised in Chicago, which I left at about 26 years old to go to the University of Wisconsin, where I worked as a lab tech in the veterinary school and then later worked as a lab tech in the Department of Surgery Transplant. I am of Mexican origin, but my family's been in this country for 2 generations. We are originally of Purepecha and Raramuri descent. This green area here in the graph is the often forgotten Purepecha or Tarascan Empire. The right next to it is the more talked about Aztec Empire in the gray. And then down here at the bottom you have the southern portion of Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula, and down into Honduras and Guatemala you have the Mayan Empire. My other group are called the Raramuri or the Tarahumara, and they're from the state of Chihuahua in Mexico in a place called Copper Canyon, which is about 3 times the size of the Grand Canyon. I approach all of my work from this perspective here of that we are people that share a common ancestry and that have spread across the Western Hemisphere, and we share a lot of the same traumatic history, and we share, most importantly, a lot of the health disparities in relation to the settler colonial groups that have moved in, which means we're often at the bottom of the social hierarchy and the economic hierarchy, political hierarchy, and the health outcomes hierarchy. This is a representation of a stereotypical North American Indian, and this is really the representation of a stereotypical Mesoamerican Indian, but I wasn't the author of this cartoon. Believe it or not, Mexicans are Native American. Mexico is second to Ecuador in terms of the amount of genetics that remain from the original Native American populations. They also represent a population that has a lot of native cultural elements still within the language and within the cooking and with the way that they relate to each other. But like much of Latin America, there has been several reasons for them not identifying as native. So some are admixed and some are not admixed, but even a lot of the non-admixed populations do not identify as indigenous. Part of that was they could not get rid of all the people in the different geographies, so they got rid of them on paper. Different Spanish or Mexican censuses in Mexico would disqualify you as indigenous if you wore shoes, if you spoke Spanish, if you went to school, or if you no longer spoke your indigenous language. Another big reason for Mexicans not identifying as Native American is this gentleman here, whose name is Porfirio Diaz. He himself was half Native and half Spanish. He was a tyrant in Mexico for over 40 years, and in an effort to increase the political power and economy of Mexico, he made lots of monetary deals with European countries in the United States. And to get a lot of those programs pushed through in Mexico, he basically intimidated, tortured, or killed indigenous people or people who had indigenous leanings. And so both admixed and non-admixed people, to survive, basically dropped their indigenous identification. I currently work in South Dakota with Lakota, Nakota, and Dakota peoples. Here in this picture here, you see the original range of the Lakota people, and the Dakota people ranged into North Dakota, eastern South Dakota, Minnesota, and parts of Wisconsin. There are also Nakota speakers in Nebraska and Iowa, and southern South Dakota, and all the way up into Canada. And I currently work in Eagle Butte, South Dakota, at a place called Missouri Breaks Industries Research, whose main claim to fame is the Strong Heart Study, which is a 30-year epidemiological study in cardiovascular disease in American Indians. We also do other types of work, and we have other university research partners. Many of the projects that we do involve genomics and different forms of health disparity, but we now are branching out into doing public health education, public health intervention, general research and science education, and most recently science, technology, engineering, and math education. So that's a brief introduction to who I am. If you have any questions, leave your comments in the comment section below. I thank you very much.